Update. For the original story, click the link in the description. My wife had an affair with her coworker. Thanks to everyone for the advice, concern, and resources. With everything going on, I haven't been able to respond to every comment or message, but they've been very much appreciated. This week has been the most excruciating. I feel like a helpless kid again who can only watch as the world around me falls apart. And I'm going through it without my wife, who has been my best friend and support. I was certain I didn't have the whole story. So yesterday I looked into contacting OBS. I knew I needed to hear what she had to say in order for me to get some clarity. She wouldn't have any agenda to lie or withhold whatever information she had from me. I found her FB account, and wrote her on Messenger. She responded no more than 10 minutes later and offered to video call right then. I immediately replied that I was available. One look without a word, and I could tell she was going through a similar hell like me. She said that shortly after being escorted out of the workplace last Monday, she actually tried to get in contact with me, but couldn't find my details. In fact, one of the last things she said to my wife was threatening that she was going to tell me. When she was saying this, all I could think of was how my wife rushed home that day and how her sister told her that I needed to hear about the affair from her. I asked her if she knew more about what occurred during the team lead trip, or was this really just an ons, and how did she find out? What she told me confirmed my fears. The affair dates back to before the trip. Documented proof from texts that were of an intense emotional affair. All of this, OBS shared with me with screen share, and I could barely keep it together. She told me that back in January, she noticed that her husband was withdrawn and disinterested towards her. There were times she saw him texting my wife, but he would brush it off as work-related convos. The day before the trip, she went to the job to drop something off her, so had forgotten, and she found in his office with my wife, standing close together, joking and smiling. She said the whole atmosphere between them felt flirty. When they noticed her, they parted, and my wife's face looked panicked while her husband went over it all together. She said it was then that she felt certain there was something going on between her husband and my wife, but she didn't address it because she wanted undeniable proof her husband couldn't escape from. After the trip, her so was more distant and dismissive. That night, she waited until he fell asleep and then checked his phone. She went to his text thread with my wife where everything was there to see. Intimate texts back and forth before the trip. It started as an emotional cheating. Others were of AP saying that it was impossible for him to focus at work whenever my wife was around. In these texts, it was clear that AP was the pursuer, aggressor toward my wife, but that doesn't really make a difference because she never shut down his advances. Some of the pre-trip texts were AP bashing his wife and going off about repeated miscarriages. It was just plain disgusting with how he talked about her to my wife. He kept mentioning how maybe he needed a woman like my wife. There were texts from last Thursday night with AP inviting my wife to join the team for drinks, and texts AP sent to my wife the following morning which clearly revealed that they had sex. At this point, there were no more replies from my wife after Thursday night. I didn't think it was possible for me to hurt any worse, but here I am. OSB said it took her everything to remain calm as she didn't want to alert her twins sleeping in the other room, but she didn't wake her husband up nor confront him immediately. She said that in her heart she was done with him, and that for her, he had crossed a line he couldn't come back from. She said she was more angry than she'd ever been during their marriage, and that through her anger, she was set on humiliating him like he had humiliated her. So she faked her smiles and acted like everything was fine and waited until Monday, where she was going to out him at work in front of his peers, underlings, and costumers. She said this confrontation had been brewing for a while now. Apparently, it was only a coincidence that my wife was at work that day as well. When OSB saw my wife with AP and another employee, she decided to target my wife, too. When she went on to calling out my wife tried unsuccessfully to get her to quiet down. OBS then started saying her husband had no signs of remorse in the slightest, but only anger at her public outburst. I learned from her that AP was fired the following day after the confrontation. She also kicked him out of the house, and said one of the hardest things in her life was having to explain this all to her twins. I had an idea of what she meant because I saw my own mom have to do the same thing after my dad. She said that this whole ordeal showed her who her husband really was, and while her husband pursued my wife, nonetheless my wife still had a part in the affair, and that as a woman, she had no sympathy or respect for my wife whatsoever. I told her I in no way fault her for that, and that she has every right. She actually apologized to me for her husband's role in the affair. I literally was at a loss for words for a moment, and then I apologized for the part my wife played, and she said that her and I are now a part of a club we never wanted to be in, a club that our SOs forced us in. She asked me about my wife and I. I told her that I honestly didn't know what I was going to do, but that I wasn't currently staying with my wife. She wished me all the best, and I did the same to her, and before ending the call, we exchanged numbers, so if we ever wanted to talk again. Every raw emotion was only heightened. I confided in my mom about what I learned and she still didn't voice any judgment, but I could tell that she's upset with my wife. A part of me feels great happiness that AP is losing everything, his job and his family, and that maybe he's out there suffering as well. But I'm not proud of that feeling. At the same time I feel immense guilt over that because a wife is losing her husband, and children are losing their family as they know it. Those kids are in for a whole world of pain. I feel anger also towards my wife for doing this to us, for breaking our vows, and for putting my health in jeopardy. We did have sex after she returned from the trip, and the post-trip texts hint that protection wasn't used. I do know I should resume contact with my wife regarding the information OBS has provided me with, and demand a timeline. But at the same time I feel even more lost than I was when I made the original post. I feel like I'm just drowning here.